Rights Institute one day, and thank you for letting us come to the meeting. Just slightly off what I was going to talk about, it's quite apt that I come in as the speaker, just talking about the services, and my apologies for being late, but I don't make any apologies for the lack of investment in both trains and in the bus services taking place by this government and other previous governments. And the sooner we take transport back into public ownership and have an integrated travel system, the sooner the better, and perhaps I won't turn up late for meetings on that basis. But what I want to say is I'm here today to talk about assisted dying. It's something that's close to my heart. I've been being diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years ago at the age of 61. I was given the prognosis of living for 4 to 5 years, which I'm hell-bent on proving wrong. But if I do live beyond that, it'll be a life that could last up to 11 years, when I won't have a clue about what's going on, who I am, and my personality will dramatically change. Some might say that for the better. But what I want to make clear right from the outset is that I'm not here today to talk about life and death. That isn't the issue. Today I'm here talking about people having the right to make an informed choice. I'm here to talk about compassion, and I'm here to talk about opposing inequality. I think that's a real important issue. There's an act that's quoted to me quite regularly called the Suicide Act. Under the Suicide Act, it's no longer an offence to commit suicide, but it is an offence to assist somebody in taking their own life. And I think that's perfectly right. And I'll make it very, very clear, I am not asking for any amendments to the Suicide Act. That needs to stay in place to safeguard people. What I am asking for is freestanding legislation around assisted dying for those who choose to have it, incorporating safeguards to ensure that it's only those people that receive an assisted death and nobody's abused under that system. There's been several attempts to take this through the High Courts. I've fundamentally opposed for that for about 7 or 8 years, because in my view, once the courts have ruled on something that President said, and if it's on a piece of legislation, it's not going to change. And all it's doing is making extremely rich barristers a lot richer. There's the case this week that you may have seen, Noel, whose case has been rejected. A friend of mine 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, his case was rejected in the House. Fortunately for him, he was able to get into Switzerland and he got the peaceful end he wanted, but he suffered unneedlessly, in my view, for 2 or 3 years trying to get his case through court. He suffered, other people have made well from that, and we're no further forward. There's also been a number of private members' bills where they tried to get it through the Houses of Parliament on assisted dying that have either been talked out, or the last one, 2015, was voted out on spurious arguments. I've long believed, and this is why I'm taking my campaign now while I still can, that the only way to achieve legislation like this is primarily through the trade union movement and hopefully through its political wing, the Labour Party, at some future date. But why should we need assisted dying legislation? So it's a good question that people ask. And I want to address that in 2 ways. First of all, by looking at what we've got now, and then putting forward my ideas. So the first point I want to make is that the very rich have always been able to take care of their end-of-life decisions when they've needed to. Colleagues that have medication. I know GPs that actually have stored medication for themselves as they get towards the end of their life. I'm not going to knock them for that. It shouldn't be that way, just as much as private medicine shouldn't be there. It should be open to everybody. The only other way, the only other thing that you can do is like me. I'm fortunate enough to have been pensioned off because of health reasons, and there was a small lump sum involved in my pension, which means that I'm able to save up the £8,000 it costs to go to Switzerland plus travel that goes on top of that. And I'm not complaining about paying that much money, it's something that's needed. I work very closely with the organisations in Switzerland at Life Circle, and they do put a lot of funding into campaign groups. What it does mean, though, that the most socially and economically deprived in this country, per usual, and I'll put this and sound condescending, don't have necessarily the right links or skills to access something like Life Circle in Switzerland, and certainly the majority of people cannot afford the money that's involved in that. Second point is the hypocrisy of the state and the ethical contradictions that exist. As I said, since 1968, it's not been an offence to commit suicide, but we still have this assisted dying, which is. However, the Crown Prosecution Service have ruled that they will, in essence, they will turn a blind eye to anybody that's assisting somebody to go to Switzerland. So what they've done there is actually endorsed assisted dying, but for those who can afford it. So it's morally, it's ethical, and obviously they see legal to go to Switzerland if you can afford it. Yet at this time in this country, it's still considered ethically and morally wrong to have an assisted death. So what we're doing is farming out and legitimising assisted dying, but not for those who can't afford to take it up. Another thing that you can do these days, and I've already done it, is I can write out an advance directive. I wear a medic band on my arm, so if I'm involved in an accident or if I suddenly take ill, and it's a condition that will kill me if they don't intervene, then I've got the right to refuse medical treatment. So if I'm taken to hospital, there's got to be nothing intrusive, so there's no mask, there's, I don't know, you can't really put the pipe down to aid your breathing, there's got to be no drips or anything like that, and all I want is pain relief. So I could starve to death, not just me, but anybody else has got the legal right to starve to death, which can take weeks and sometimes months to do. It's a very painful way of dying. But more so than pain for that individual, it's extremely hard for that person's loved ones, and let's not forget the other trade unionists, the health workers that have to stand helplessly by and watch that happen. Now, I know exactly what it's like to stand helplessly by and watch somebody in that condition. My father was diagnosed with multiple system atrophy at the age of 60, and quickly into that he developed vascular dementia, and he completely changed from the man he used to be. He became aggressive, he became abusive, he became lewd, which is something that he would have been appalled at. He wasn't able to wash and look after himself in any way, but during lucid periods he would plead with me, Alex, do something, kill me, do anything you can, I can't carry on like this. Just imagine that's your dad, that's your partner, that's a close friend, pleading with you to die. And I'll be really, really honest, only one thing stopped me, and it wasn't the fear of prison. The only thing that stopped me is I wasn't confident that I could do it in a way that would have ended his life peacefully and not left him in a worse state. I would much sooner have gone to prison and taken 4 or 5 years than face the daily guilt. It's 13 years since he died, and I still get those feelings of guilt for laying down my hero. I wouldn't wish that position on anybody. Nobody should have to live with that when there is a humane way of finishing that life. The highest level of hypocrisy comes from the courts, who only this week again ruled that it wasn't good, it wasn't moral, it wasn't something that should exist within the English Parliament. It's not a breach of human rights. I understand they rule that way, that's how they interpret the legislation. Why I do have a problem with hypocrisy is that there's been a number of occasions over the last 5 or 6 years, the most recent being last year, where there was a couple in the late 80s, early 90s, and the woman was constantly begging her husband, kill me, please stop the suffering, please stop the pain. It was documented, or which was well known. It's hard to say this, but in many ways, what he did then, in my opinion, was an act of love and extremely courageous. He suffocated his wife. Now that couldn't have been easy for his wife. It's not an easy death, suffocating. You know, people think you just put a pillow over, but there's kicking, there's frustration involved in it. And trying to hold a pillow over someone's face and watching them suffer like that, if you don't like him, I can't see how you could do that, but doing that to somebody you love must be extremely difficult. As soon as he'd done it, he phoned the police and reported it. He was arrested, he was charged with murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. On appeal, his sentence was reduced to time that he'd already spent in prison. Now, whilst I say I applaud what that man done, I can understand why he did it. It's not right. And what that's actually done, that precedent and precedents that have gone before that, have actually put a lot of people at risk. It's put a lot of vulnerable people at risk because it makes it extremely cloudy about what is murder. And there's no doubt in my mind what he did was murder, and there's a set sentence for that. I understand his reasons, and I'm glad that his sentence was reduced, because it must be difficult what he's got to live with. But people talk about safeguarding people when they're opposing assisted dying. That, as it stands, leaves people extremely vulnerable and extremely at risk. Just to recap that first half of my argument, those who have money are okay. That's nothing new. We know that as trade unionists. And I think we've got a duty to address that issue, to think about that issue and hopefully take action around it. Because we've got to ask, is that fair? The country have ruled that it's ethical and moral to go abroad for those who can afford it. Again, we've got to ask, is that fair? We can refuse treatment, but that isn't an easy thing to do, though I will go through with that if I need to. Is that fair? And the judicial scope leaves people, as I've just said, extremely vulnerable. Now, the second part of it is, what do I want to see? I believe that assisted dying should be available to any person over the age of consent who has an illness or condition that is not curable and has a permanent impact on the quality of their life. And that's what you can do, the quality of their life. Secondly, anyone over the age of consent who has the capacity to produce an expressed intent in an extended or advanced directive, so it's well documented, that if they ever fall into certain situations that they should be able to qualify for a legally assisted death. At the time of making that statement, there should be somebody signs that they had capacity at the time and weren't under duress, and that they have capacity at the time that they are receiving their assisted death. Now, that's the policy that has been in place in Switzerland since the 1940s. There's a lot of other countries have euthanasia, a lot of other countries have different forms of assisted dying. But in Switzerland, there's a tried and tested method that's worked since the 1940s. Now, there has been plenty of court cases taken against them. You'd worry if there wasn't, to be honest with you. I'm happy that I can stand it and say cases have been taken rather than nothing, because that stinks of cover-up. But not one case has ever been held. There's never been any validity in cases where people have been coerced or it was something against their will. Now, I also, with them demands, believe that there should be a number of safeguards in place, and I'm always open to discussing with people who oppose us to strengthen those safeguards. Because the majority of arguments, in fact, I've never heard an argument against assisted dying that is actually against the concept of assisted death. It's always around safeguarding issues, and that is something that we must take extremely serious. So, first of all, within the demand, an assisted death is a safeguard itself, because it's, when I go for mine, and I'll explain that later on, it's me who has to do the action. I'm not asking a doctor to kill me. That part of the safeguard should be that there should be at least 2 doctors with evidence that can establish that the illness and condition is not curable and that the conditions exist. That the advance directive is written out and signed by a person capable of saying that the person was competent at the time, and a qualified person who can endorse that process has taken place at the end of it. For example, in Switzerland, when a person does an assisted death in Switzerland, prior to them arriving, the police are notified. The whole process is videoed and everything is turned over to the police after that death, so there's a full documentation of all the paperwork, exactly what went on when the person was asking for it, when the person was being rechecked, that they wanted the assisted death. All that is documented and videoed. Anybody who assists a person by going to Switzerland isn't allowed to leave for at least 6 or 7 hours after the death, so that the police can look into what's going on and, if needs be, detain anybody who thinks that something has been put wrong. But what is assisted death? Again, I'll just refer to my experience. What will happen to me is I've had to fill in, I had to apply to Life Circle, I had to send all my medical evidence off. Once all that had gone, so the medical evidence is done, they then wanted me to produce a document which was like a biography. I had to explain what I'd done in my life, where I was in my life, how things was changing, and be extremely explicit about why I wanted an assisted death that I had to go through. Then, before I got what they call the green light, I had to go and see a psychiatrist and be interviewed by the psychiatrist who would state that I had capacity at that time. That was 3 years ago. But when I go to Switzerland, I must get another assessment that is no more than 10 weeks old, done in this country. When I get to Switzerland the day before my death, I will see medical staff who will reassess me the day before. On the day of the death, an intravenous drip will be set up, just the same as any like one in the hospital. The only difference being on this one, normally in the hospital they control it from the top when they want to add a little bit more to it. The difference with this one is there's a slide which it's my responsibility to move. So that's what I said about it being assisted death. Prior to that, again, I will be questioned. Why are you here? Do you know why you're here? All that, these kind of questions are like literally seconds before. At any time during that process, if there's any hesitancy or suggestions of coercion in my responses, it's stopped, which I think is a good thing. So it's very clear that when that process is taking place, that it's my will, my volition, and my actions. I won't go into what capacities. If anybody wants to ask me that afterwards, I can respond to that. The campaign is taking off really well. I'm getting lots and lots of support, national press, local press, TV, etc. And it's amazing just how much support we're getting. The key opposition, most people will say it's the religious people that oppose you. That's not the truth. The biggest obstacle that we have is the British Medical Association. I'll correct that. The leadership of the British Medical Association who are opposed to it. I and other organisations that campaign for assisted dying have wrote to them on several occasions, by resolutions at the conference, asking them to take a neutral position. Because if you look in what's been in front of Parliament and people have been opposing it, the fallback position is the British Medical Association don't approve it. The British Medical Journal did a survey 2 or 3 months ago, and an unprecedented 250,000 people responded to that. I'm sure you've all been involved in petitions and tried to get things done in the past, and 250,000 is a massive number. 85% of that 250,000 doctors said that they would support assisted dying. So the first time that we've seen the leadership of unions or parties out of sync with the membership. I genuinely believe that assisted dying should be available to all, and I'm here today to say, can you help me? Thank you. Oh, no, that's the most important question.
Just a quick one, Chair. Have you got any need on this issue?
Yeah, we have. We run a lot of campaigns. We run things from going to meetings like this, going across to. I mean, I go on picket lines constantly. I always have to. That's part of my life. That's part of my ritual. We give leaflets out. We write to MPs, and again, a lot of them will either say it's against their religious conscience. It might be, but what the hell has that to do with people? That's their right. They've got that right to choose of God if they wish, and do it. In fact, I spoke at a public meeting in Lancaster a few weeks back, and there's a woman, Lizzie Collins, who's a local county councillor. She's standing for election in Morecambe and Loomside, I think it says. And I thought it was quite brave what she did. She actually stood up at a public meeting and said that she supports assisted dying. She's prepared to listen to disabled groups and other people's opposition to assisted dying, but not religion, because she doesn't have a God. And I applaud for making that statement. When I'm sure that won't go down well with a lot of the people actually standing, to be honest with you, but I applaud her for that. My own MP, Cat Smith, is a devoted Christian. She's MP of Lancaster. I wrote to her just in 2015 before the last private members bill was there, and she said that she was unsure about the issue, which I expected. Fortunately for me, it was around about the same time that Jeremy Corbyn was standing first time to the leadership of the Labour Party, and I saw her at a meeting talking about equality. So I really wrote to her and said, I applaud the stand you take on fighting inequality. And then I just outlined what I put in about what people are available. She changed her mind, which I applaud her for, because that's where somebody has put their own political religious beliefs to the back and took that equality issue on. So there's quite a few MPs do support us. I know that 800 people have written directly to Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the Labour Party, because both him and is it Dan Abbott, that when it was in the House in 2015, didn't turn up. People have written to him and not one response. What he has come out recently and said is that what we need to do first of all is ensure that there's sufficient funding for the NHS. Well, the Right to Die with Dignity and other campaigning bodies stand squarely in favour of further investment in the NHS without question, particularly care. I think that care should be taken back into the public sector and be there for care and not profit. And people talk about palliative care, but what people don't realise is that in the main that's a charity. That should be fully funded by the government. So we stand for that. But he said, well, when we get that in place, we'll address that issue. Well, I wouldn't have accepted an argument when people was looking for the right to choice on abortions. I wouldn't have said, well, we'll address that problem once we've got childcare facilities in place and work pressures. So that's mixed with the MPs at the moment. Clearly, because of the last vote, there's more opposing than do support it. But I think this way they should be accountable, and this is why I believe in the campaign for the trade unions.
Would anybody else have a question?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Just our speaker. Has there been any investigations taking place either here or America in respect of people that's abused this situation, where there's a great deal of money to be made in respect to the situation that we face with? And if so, what was the findings of that? Has any actual organisation gone into it in depth to find out exactly what can and will happen in certain issues?
Yeah. Thank you. The Christian groups have lots of funding and conduct lots of research. As I said earlier on, there's been many cases taken in Switzerland where there's been arguments for abuse or suspected abuse. Again, that's investigated. It's investigated through the courts, and it's listened to through the court system. And not one case have they found abuse. Oregon, in America, was the first. In America, certain states support it and other states don't. There's been lots of cases brought there again, which have been investigated, which again, there's a lot of money goes into the funding of those opposing assisted dying, and nothing has come out of it. Belgium and Holland actually operate a system with euthanasia. Now, in essence, I don't have an opposition to euthanasia as long as it's through choice. What I do recognise, and that's why I support assisted dying, is that assisted dying through euthanasia could be open to more abuse. But I read constantly on Facebook pages, I've been called fascist, I've been called all kinds of things of recent. Clearly people don't understand what fascism is. But I've had all kinds of abuse put me, and they quote things. Now, my position is quite clear. If I give a statistic, it's based on empirical evidence. The majority of the arguments that you hear against it, when they're raising questions, which are serious issues, is it being abused? Could it be abused? There's no cases, to my knowledge, been found, but everything that comes against us is incorrect. So I was having a debate on a disabled forum last week, and it said that Switzerland is corrupt, they're euthanizing young children, it's always been abused. And I said, okay, that's a point of view. Please provide me with the evidence. Show me the evidence where you've got that, and I will be the first person to change my demands and to be, I would be, and so would the organisations fundamentally opposed to that kind of thing taking place. I was blocked. So, you know, I would love, well, actually I wouldn't love to see. I wouldn't love to see evidence because I like to think that it's not being abused. If there is evidence, I've yet to see it, and if it is given to me, I will take it extremely serious. I've changed some of the demands that I make. I used to talk about my dad, but he was in a state of dementia. People would say to me, he doesn't know what's going on. But he was extremely fit. And when I say a hard man, I don't mean a nutcase that was a report, you know, he was physically fit. He ran a marathon at 60, 3 hours, 15 minutes, in long. It was the longest he's ever taken him. And the only time I'd seen him cry was when his mum died. I watched the wall fall on him once. Another time I watched him fall 3 flights through the floor. He was in my sister's attic, trying to do something. He come right through that, the bedroom level, and straight on the floor. I hit the bang and I run round, and the bone, it broke several ribs, it broke his leg. I think he called it compound fracture, you know, when the knee was sticking out. And all he said was, that hurt. and he was trying to get up. And I'm like, trying not to throw up, you know, and all this thing together and get an ambulance. Not a tear, but every time he made a mess of himself, he cried. You know, this is when he was in a world of his own, didn't know what was going on. Every time I took him to the shower, because he couldn't figure out how to shower and clean himself, and I'm watching, his son's washing intimate parts, he cried. Now, I stopped using that because there's people from disabled groups say, well, that's not a lack of dignity because that's how we live all the time. You know, so I am prepared to listen, and like I said, I don't focus on that as much as I used to be because I take into consideration that could be offensive to some people, and if it is offensive, and it can be, I try to withdraw it. So any challenges I want, I prefer to go and speak at meetings and be in discussion groups with oppositionists, because that's where I can learn, and hopefully they can learn. Because as I've said, the opposition is always around. This is what your question was about safeguards. How good are they? I've read my safeguards out. I've sent them to all kinds of groups and said to them, you raise objections on the possibility of the vulnerable. Well, the vulnerable can't go because the vulnerable can't make a decision. It's covered by the Mental Health Act. But anybody else that's vulnerable, here are the safeguards. Please show me the flaws in these safeguards. Talk to me and we can develop them. And then together, we can develop a system that's acceptable to everybody so everyone's protected.
Sean,
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
you give an example of America, didn't you? Where they are over there.
Yeah.
You know, that medical situation over there is nothing but money grabbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how would it go with assisted dying? Wouldn't you they'd have to pay, wouldn't they? Before they then should say them.
I mean, I believe in the National Health Service. I think that we all contribute to it, our grandparents have contributed to it, etc. And hopefully, future generations will continue to respond to it because there'll still be a National Health Service. So ideally, I think it should be there for people. But what I would say is another safeguard is in Switzerland, the medical staff who administer assisted dying have nothing to do with the medical profession. So in essence, I live in Lancaster, I've got a great GP. The only thing I criticise about the NHS and the hospital near me is there's not enough money put into it. and I love the staff, and I go in there and talk to their education meetings on this subject. But none of them would be allowed to look after my, be involved in my assisted dying. So, you know, there's not, because people say, well, the Tories will bring it in, and the Tories will do it to cut back on stuff. And there's two parts to your answers to it, so I'm sorry about hogging time. That wouldn't take place, and in actual fact, the Tories are the biggest vote against assisted dying. Now, I've said that I won't speak on anything that I'm not getting political evidence about, but I take at least 30 tablets a day, plus inhalers and tramadol when I feel fit to see it. What you see in front of you is a damn good investment for the pharmaceutical industry. The drugs to kill me wouldn't cost more than 800 quid. Now, I can only speculate. I can't say for a fact that the Tories and the pharmaceutical industry...
I asked you a question about America, didn't I?
Sorry,
America.
will it happen over here?
Yeah, no, what happens over there when people want assisted dying? What's the cost of that? And
It's all right. I was saying, Louis de Saroux did a program
Yes,
on
yes,
that,
yeah.
and it was extremely, well, it's upset him, I know, but it was extremely enlightening, really, as to how some of the prosecutors, and you know, this fellow, he had pancreatic cancer, which actually Dan's died from, which is horrible. But anything like that is, but he made his choice. It took him a while to go, but he was peaceful. You know, all his family were around him. Of course they were upset, but I don't know, I think it was very interesting that he actually brought that to the public.
Direct answer to the question. I spoke to people from Oregon last time. I don't know if there's a charge or not a charge, but there's massive opposition to it in America, and I would assume that it doesn't cost as much for the assisted death as it would to carry on taking medication, etc. Which, if people want to do that, they should have the right to do it. I'm sorry I didn't respond to it correctly.
Thank you very much. Just the last one then, is it?
I just want to point, Pastor really, I applaud your bravery in making the case. I do have a certain concern though, as to at what stage you would say, I want to go now. I've reached the stage where I know there's no further treatment I can have. I want to go in. How do you judge when that is?
I think that's subjective. For most people, if it's something like cancer and other conditions, I think you can monitor. The pain is too much for me now. I'm getting that way that I'd sooner be dead. So that you would be a person who would judge when they have the assisted death. There's two flaws with what I'm asking for. One is the issue of people having capacity and being physically able to move the machine. I'm very aware that debars people that might have locked-in syndrome because they couldn't make that act. And the second issue is people like myself that have got dementia. I've got to make my choice before it's too late, because once I lose capacity, I can no longer go. So for me, it's a little bit, for anybody that's suffering from dementia, it's a little bit more difficult. So I initially, from the diagnosis and what was said, I, in all honesty, didn't expect to be here. Because at the end of 2018, early 2019, down as me going, you know, that was marked on what I'd been told and the deterioration that I'd noticed. Fortunately for me, that deterioration seems to have stopped for a while. So what I'm doing now is reflecting on it. I'm putting that back 12 months. So I'm now thinking 2019, early 2020. I have to rely very heavily on friends and colleagues, which isn't easy for them, because I'm not convinced I always notice what's going wrong. The reason I'm here today is because I turned up 24 hours too early for a meeting. You know, so I'm aware of things that I do and I can't do. Everything's written down on here what I wanted to say. That wouldn't have happened before. You know, I make plans and they don't go through. Neil's with me today. I rely very heavily on Neil and other friends in Lancaster to help me out with day-to-day things as we stand. But I'm relying on them to sort of say, actually, we can see that the deterioration is taking place now, or me noticing it. And I watch that because sometimes you can just feel racked off. You know, things are going wrong, and sometimes I've sat there and I thought, it's time. But then, you know, just give yourself a little bit more reflection, a week or so, and thankfully I had that chance, that opportunity, and I'm here today. I hope that was his question.
Yeah, thank you.
I did say that that was the last one. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'll leave a few leaflets there. If you can, the way you can help me, if you would, is if you agree with what we're saying, please take the leaflets away, contact other union branches and try and get us an invite. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, there's an email number on there. Write to me. I'll send you my mobile phone number, and hopefully we can sit down and meet together. And thanks again very much for having us here today. And apologies for the lack of investment in the transport.